Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hi, I'm Tracy Stuckrath with Thrive Meetings and Events and your host for the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where we talk about all things food and beverage with experts in all facets of food and beverage. And we're in December, we're in the middle of Hanukkah, and we're about to hit the Christmas celebrations as well. But on my show is Ahuva Gatdiner, who I found on Instagram a few months ago. Because of the bread she posted. It was such beautiful bread. And unfortunately, it's got gluten in it, so I can't eat it, but it was still a work of art. And I wanted to talk to her. So I am excited to have her on the show today. We're in the middle of Hanukkah. I think we've got 3 days left in that. So I want to learn a little bit more about her celebrations, what she does. She has a company and an Instagram post and a bakery called Homegrown Kosher, with the goal to bridge the food knowledge gap between ground and plate for her Orthodox Jewish community. Welcome to the show, Ahuva.
Thank you.
So I found you on Instagram, and I'm sure that I don't even know how many followers you have, but can you tell the listeners of the Eating at a Meeting podcast more about you and how you came about doing what you do?
So I've always loved growing things. And I always loved talking about it and sharing it. And at a certain point, I think about 4 years ago, I joined Instagram to be able to share even more. It was a relatively new platform, at least for me. And I started posting pictures of my garden and my chickens and my sourdough bread, the pickles that I made and the sauerkraut that I made. To share, I had most of my followers were related to me, I think, in the beginning, but more and more people found me. And I was posting pictures of my sourdough bread when members of the area where I live, members of the community in the area where I live, started asking me if I sell it. It was interesting because I had never thought about it being like something popular. I had missed the fact that it became a trend at some point. I had been baking for a long time then, so I pivoted and went towards a microbakery in my own house, which grew. So my page became about the bakery and also about sharing the things that I always wanted to share. It's not so small. It's not only in my own kitchen anymore. I have a separate facility in my house that I work out of now for the bakery. And I really work hard on my page, which really is all about growing things. It's basically, I explain it, is that it's a food page, but not just about cooking food, but about where the food comes from. And I really try to talk a lot about those things. I think in the world in general, but especially in my community, maybe 150 years ago, it wasn't like this. I mean, 150 years ago, the world was very different, but people knew where their food came from. But right now, the food is all packaged on the shelf. Like all the carrots look very similar in size, and all, you see 5 types of apples, and really there are thousands, maybe even more. So people aren't educated and don't even realize, and they want to know. So the more I share, the more people keep asking questions, and they want to know about everything. Like, for example, today, by the time this podcast comes out, it'll be up. People keep asking about, I have chickens and I have rabbits. They're out there. They're farm animals, but they're in my suburban backyard. How they manage in the winter. We have a big storm coming. So I have even more questions about how I manage them in the winter. So most people who follow me don't necessarily have chickens and rabbits who live outdoors in their backyard, want to know. So I'm going to be sharing with the 4 things that they need. You can come over to my Instagram page and take a look at what I posted in the winter. And it isn't what you think, just like we try to think of ourselves. If we were out in the winter, what we would want, we'd want heat. They don't necessarily, right. Everything. People just want to know. And I love to talk about it and I love to share. So people have found me and I've been growing since I started. And at the same time, 2.5 days a week, I'm really busy full time in the bakery.
That's amazing. And it's funny that you mentioned your animals. Side note is that I walk at night, and here in North Carolina, we have bears, and sometimes you see them in our neighborhood. And my dad is always like, watch out for the bears. And I'm like, okay, well, now it's kind of getting cold. They're going to be hibernating. So I don't really have to watch out for them, but they're used to the weather.
Right.
I mean, if you weren't around there to protect them, from the storm that's coming, they would find a way to protect themselves.
Yeah, they would find a place with protection, and they would probably be okay. Farm animals are different than animals like dogs that have become so used to humans taking care of them over, selective breeding, whatever it is, that they really need to be indoors or in a much more protected. Farm animals have been bred to live outside. People were not bringing their chickens and their sheep and their goats and their cattle into their houses in the snowstorms. So as long as they have their own home as a safe place, then they're fine.
Well, that's so fun. And, scouring your Instagram page, your photos are absolutely stunning. The stories that you tell with your pictures and just your life are remarkable as well. And one that I came about the other day is that you were making something, from cotton that your dad grew. So that just blew my mind even more. I was like, so can you tell people a little bit about that?
So I was making wicks for the Hanukkah menorah. We light an oil menorah, not candles, just to commemorate the miracle of the oil that burned for days. Many people light candles, but we light olive oil specifically. And my father likes to grow everything. So the things that I grow are mainly things that grow well in the climate, more things like vegetables, things like that. My father likes to try to grow everything, which means that living here in the Northeast, the house becomes a jungle in the winter because anything that can't handle the climate comes inside, including the banana tree and the coffee plant and the trees. Yes. So one of the things he grows is cotton in planters, because you have to start them indoors in the spring when it's still too cold for them to be outdoors, and then bring them indoors again in the fall. It's so interesting that the cotton, if you look at my page, you saw that the cotton flower looks like a cotton ball, except it has seeds in it. Mm-hmm. You just pull off the cotton. It's quite hard actually to get that cotton off those seeds, but you pull off the cotton and then you just twist it and I make the wicks that way. And it's a lot of fun to see like where it grew. I have to remember next summer to show everyone the plant when it's growing. I didn't think of it this summer, but it's a plant that grows cotton balls. It's wacky. And a lot of people don't even realize that.
Well, I am in North Carolina, so there is a lot of cotton that's grown here. So you can drive down the highway and see the cotton fields, but that just blew my mind because it's taking something like what you do is educating of this is where it comes from. The t-shirt that I have on right now, was made from that cotton plant that you're growing, it could have been. So
yeah, exactly. It's really amazing.
Yes, exactly. So, happy Hanukkah, again. And so what are you making for Hanukkah? What foods do you eat for Hanukkah? And I'm sure you're baking it for your family, but also for your customers. So tell us a little bit about what you're making for home, but also selling to your customers.
So I'm going to go first with my customers. I bake the same thing every week. I bake sourdough bread, artisan sourdough bread, the same 4 varieties every week. And I also sell a frozen sourdough pizza dough that people can defrost and make either pizza with it, or people make rolls or pretzels and things with it. I don't necessarily change what I'm selling with the seasons. These are the things that are the most popular. And I have it very efficient that I'm able to make these things efficiently. For my time, I'm working by myself. I don't have any help necessarily in the bakery, because my husband helps out sometimes. So it's not really anything different, except that there was more of a demand for the frozen pizza dough. People are having get-togethers with their family and things like that. People do traditionally eat more dairy meals, so pizza dough is popular on Hanukkah. I am allergic to dairy, so I don't, but that is something that people eat. Generally on Hanukkah, people eat things that are fried to commemorate that miracle of the oil that lasted for 8 days when the Jews, after fighting off the Syrian Greeks who were trying to not let us keep our religion off, they got back into the temple, and all they found is they had broken open everything. They found one little jar of oil that had not been broken, and they poured that into the menorah in the temple, had a big menorah, and they lit it. And the miracle was that lasted the 8 days, that just burned for 8 days. And normally it takes 8 days to travel to wherever they got the olive oil from, make new olive oil, and bring it back again to the temple in Jerusalem. Wow. They thought they would only light for 1 day, and then the rest of the 7 days they wouldn't have light. But the miracle was that it lasted. It burned. So we eat foods that are fried in oil. Latkes, which are made out of potato, like potato pancakes. Those are traditional. Donuts have become very traditional also. I made fried chicken last night because that's fried too. Also, not necessarily does it have to be fried, things with olive oil. I made olive oil muffins. I have a recipe on my blog and on my Instagram page. There's a picture of it. That's something made with olive oil, also not necessarily fried, not as heavy. Those are generally the things that are traditional. There's lots of other things like, I don't know if you would call them traditional, but for example, little called Hanukkah gelt. It means money in Yiddish, and it was traditional to give children gifts of money. So they've made now little chocolate coins. They're like covered in silver foil, so you give those out also. So that became a thing recently. But generally, I don't normally fry things. I'm just not. It takes a lot of time. It's very messy, and it's not necessarily the best for you. But Hanukkah time is when I fry things.
So and again, I want to eat everything that you put on your Instagram page. It looks delicious. But getting back to healthy and doing some research on you, I found out that you were born with a heart defect, and that how has that impacted your life? From when you were little till now, and what you eat. And has it, and did that inspire any of what goes around homegrown kosher?
So it didn't necessarily inspire what I eat, really. It's something I was born with. It's not my heart defect wasn't caused by any lifestyle issues. It was a fluke, basically, not even necessarily something genetic. So I have 8 siblings and 4 children and many nieces and nephews, and no one else has the same one as me. It was a fluke. My aortic valve was not born the same as everyone else's. It's supposed to have 3 flaps, and mine was actually born with 1. So I went through my childhood just going to the cardiologist for checkups and not needing anything. But in my young adulthood, I started to need different interventions. And a few years ago, I had open heart surgery to finally replace it. After that happened is when I suddenly had more energy than I had in my memory. Wow. What happens with something like this is they don't necessarily jump to do open heart surgery because it's a big deal. So the changes and the symptoms sneak up on you. So they snuck up on me, and I didn't even realize how much weaker I was than I really could have been until after I had my surgery and I went through months of recovery. And then suddenly I had the energy to, I wanted to do things. And that's when I started my Instagram page, because I always like talking about this, but let's share this with the world. And that the bakery also came after that, because I wanted to be able to share my bread, and I had the energy to be able to do it. I did not realize that it would become what it is now, but I would never have had the energy to do this. And I felt like the push to do something and make a difference, because I suddenly had so much more strength and had my health back, which is really amazing. I didn't even realize that I didn't have it. Now, is everything perfect? I don't know. I don't have any basis for comparison. Sometimes I get tired. I have harder days and better days, but I definitely feel better than I felt before. So I've got to do something with it.
Well, we're all benefiting from that. Okay, so you're Orthodox Jewish, you're female, and you're a farmer. How do those all play into that? And is kosher farming different than standard farming, if there is such a thing? I mean, do you have to get the farm certified kosher, or is that just the bakery?
Well, it's not really a farm. It's my backyard. Right. I have a garden. I like to share about how things grow, but I would definitely not consider it a farm. The bakery is certified kosher. The rabbi comes to check it and checks all my ingredients to make sure that all the ingredients I'm using are kosher. I also sift the flour to make sure there's no insects in it. Insects are not kosher. It's a big job. Yes. I had to actually switch suppliers in the past year, about a year and a half ago, actually, because one supplier had an issue with an infestation in their warehouse, which was not fun. And I was sending back flour, and now it's fine, but I still have to check. The things that I grow necessarily are not necessarily different than somebody who's not growing for kosher. I do stay away from growing things like leafy greens, which tend to have more of an issue with infestation of bugs. Bugs are not kosher. I don't want to be spraying what needs to be sprayed, even if it's organic. Myself breathing it in and the protection to keep it from getting infested. And if I grow something and it's all infested and I can't eat it because it's hard to get off all the little tiny bugs off the cabbage or whatever, it'll be very sad. So I reserve my garden space for things that are easy to remove bugs or don't have it as much of an issue with infestation. I think the main difference is that the majority of the audience of my page, not everyone, but a lot of people are Orthodox Jews, and they see in me someone who looks like them. And they say, like, if I can grow things, so can they. Like, it does just, I'm an Orthodox Jewish woman. I'm a mother. I work, I have my bakery, and I find the time to grow things. And they're inspired. And I also do something called garden consultations. I do them in person. I do them over Zoom, where I help people who are new gardeners who want to grow things, but would like it laid out in an easy way, what to grow. And I don't necessarily tell them what to grow. I ask, what do you like to eat? And then we figure out how to grow it easily and set up their garden spaces in a way that they can enjoy it and they're not overwhelmed by it. And when to plant, what to plant, where to buy the seeds, everything. I walk them through it. But also on my page, not just that, I talk about these things all the time. And I try to inspire. I joke that I'm an influencer, but not an influencer who's trying to sell cosmetics or clothing. I'm trying to influence people to grow things. Even if they live in an apartment and they have a small balcony, you can grow a few tomato plants. Just because I feel like growing your food, even if it's only a very small percentage of your food, connects you to your food and you appreciate it more. And it just, people have lost so much connection in the modern era. And that feeling of disconnect really affects people's mental state also. And even just growing some small thing and being connected. I don't know. It's so good for me. It's so good for my mental health, which is why I've always been doing it.
Yeah. And when you go out and you cut something off the plant that you are like, oh my gosh, this just came fresh from my garden versus from, packaged, in the grocery store. We don't grow a lot here, but I do go, and there's 3 farmers that I visit at the Saturday farmers market. And they're all, one of them's a farmer on his own. He's built a huge farm, built a farm on his grandmother's land. And he's out there every single week. But their foods taste so much better because it's literally was picked like the day before. That's and amazing. It's amazing how much more flavor and nutrients that it had. Not that I can tell that the nutrients are in there, but I know because of the flavor that they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like even if you just grow something very small yourself, it makes you appreciate those farmers so much more. When you see how much work it was to grow your small cucumber plant, you really appreciate the farmers who are out there. Even the stuff you buy in the grocery store was grown by real people, real farmers who worked hard for that. And I think those are really underappreciated people in our society, the people who grow our food, and everyone eats.
Yes. It is our one common ground, no matter where you are and what religion you are. We all have to eat. Now, one of the other posts that I saw when I first reached out to you a couple months ago was the honey. And you did a really cool, week-long study or informational thing on honey. And you've got bees in your backyard too, right?
Yes. I'm actually not the beekeeper. A friend of ours is a beekeeper. A while ago, actually someone else, it wasn't him, was had some hives as a hobby, where anybody had room in their backyard because he didn't have any place to keep them. I was like, I want them. Because I have a garden and really need pollinators for certain things like cucumbers and squashes. So I said, me, and he put the hives in our backyard. He moved on to other things, but for another friend of ours recently also needed a place for hives and put them in our yard. We get honey from it. We share it with him, and the pollinators are really important. And there had been an issue before that, before I had bees in my yard, where I wasn't necessarily getting as many cucumbers because of the lack of bees. Now that I have my own honeybees, it really makes a difference. And they're really fun to watch. Also, they're not at all aggressive. People see these yellow jacket, which is a type of they're really aggressive. They're not even bees. They look yellow, but the regular honeybees won't bother you unless you're messing with their hive without a bee suit, which is not a smart thing to do. But otherwise, I watch them in my yard doing their thing. And it's amazing that they taking the pollen and moving it around in the process of drinking nectar from the flowers and turning that into honey. And they make so much honey. They make way more honey than they can use, which is if a beekeeper sets up a hive in a way where there are some extra boxes on top, they'll just fill those with honey that they don't need. And that's how we get honey. And the flavor is totally different than honey. Is it honey or is it honey? That's another question you can
exactly.
That you buy in the store. And depending on the time of year, we pull it off of the hive. Depending on what's flowering then, it'll also taste different.
I think that's so fun to taste the different flavors of honey. There's a local honey beekeeper that sells honey in the farmer's market as well. But you can get it depending on where you are. And I think that you don't think about that. You just go to the store and buy honey and it's kind of bland, but you can get it with different flavors. And it's not actually infused. It's the natural flavor of it, depending on where it was made.
Exactly.
Okay. So one thing that you said a few minutes ago was that you were allergic to milk or to dairy. And one of the questions that I ask everybody is, what does a safe and inclusive food and beverage experience mean to you? And someone who is Orthodox Jew as well as has a food allergy, can you share with us what that does mean to you?
So being an Orthodox Jew, when I'm in a kosher restaurant or any kosher certified food type of situation, I don't really have an issue because meat and dairy are kept separate. So as long as I stay away from dairy restaurants, I'm fine, which is really great because I can go into a meat restaurant, order anything and not have to worry. There was no butter, there was no milk, there was no cream, nothing even came in the door. So that really helps me in that way. I miss out on dairy restaurants, but I wouldn't even risk it because I understand that it's a dairy restaurant and they can't be expected to keep dairy out. That's what it is. For kosher, that is something that I've been thinking about actually a lot recently, especially since talking to you. When I'm in my own community, my own bubble, would you say it's not as much of an issue because there are kosher restaurants and kosher eateries all around and the groceries, multiple kosher grocery stores that only stock kosher food. But in traveling, for example, it can become a very big issue. For example, it was a couple of years ago now, we went to Walt Disney World and there's many different types of food options there, but the kosher options are dismal, to say the least. They're basically prepackaged, double-wrapped airline meals that they keep in the freezer there. If you request a kosher meal in advance, they'll throw it into the oven, and it's terrible. It's basically you're better off bringing in your own sandwiches, which is what we're used to doing. But whenever I go, I see lots of other Orthodox Jews there. So there's enough of a market, and I can never quite understand why they haven't just in their huge park, haven't opened up one kitchen just for kosher food. So, there are even kosher restaurants in Orlando itself. They could bring in food from there, not these horrible double wrapped. I don't understand it. Also, there's a local mall local to us, the Palisades Interstate Mall, which is a quite large mall. And when they first opened, I know that a family member was involved. He was one of the lawyers for someone. I'm trying to convince them, you have a huge Orthodox community, the largest Orthodox community in United States, right near here. You should have food options. And they weren't interested because kosher eateries would have to be closed on the Sabbath and on Jewish holidays. And they wanted something that could be open, all the time. I think they lost out because we just either brought our own food or ate chips from Target. Though recently, actually, it was right before the pandemic, which is sad. So hopefully it survives. A kosher restaurant was given permission to open there, and it's closed on the Sabbath, closed on Saturdays, closed on Jewish holidays. And every time I have been in there, even with the social distancing measures and ever since that opened, it is as full as it can be. So they missed out, and there are more people going to the mall now because of that. Also, American Dream Mall, which is in New Jersey, also recently opened. I think there's a kosher food court separate over there, which is nice.
Wow.
Full kosher.
Yeah.
This is a new thing, because when I was growing up, we just brought our sandwiches wherever we went. And if we traveled on vacation, we half the car was packed with clothes and half the car was packed with food. My mother even brought a bread machine along with us when we went up to New York when I was a kid, because there were 7 of us then, and 7 kids, and it was a lot of people. You need a lot of bread. She couldn't even pack enough bread. She took the bread machine and flour, and every night she baked 1 loaf of bread as soon as we got to where we were going, and then overnight a second one, so we'd have bread for the next day. We're used to thinking like that, but it really would be nice to be able to access, especially in places where there are a lot of Orthodox Jews. And it would be worth it if people would start to think. And I think it's happening slowly. There are still certain places that it hasn't happened, that people are realizing that, it's not as complicated as they think to have options for.
Well, I mean, there is one fast food chain that's closed every Sunday.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that.
Chick-fil-A.
Oh, really? I only eat kosher, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, so they close every single Sunday, and even the ones in the malls. I mean, there's one actually in Atlanta in the Football Hall of Fame, or National College Football Hall of Fame, and it's not even open on Sundays. So I don't see why Saturday and Sunday, especially when your malls are open both days, that would make a difference. So that's interesting. But it really does make a good point, because there is a large consumer base that eats kosher. And Sue Fishkoff, I think that she's got a book called Kosher Nation. It came out a couple of years ago, and was just talking about the number of people who are non-Jewish that are eating kosher because they trust the labeling, or they think it's a better quality food. And so the market is actually a lot bigger than probably what people think it is. But especially in your neighborhood with it, where the largest contingency of Orthodox Jews, you would think that would be, looked as a prime opportunity.
Yeah. So you're talking about people eating kosher who aren't necessarily Orthodox Jews, especially dairy allergic people. I know if you go online and you look, people are always looking for the kosher certification that says it's parv or dairy, as opposed to, or dairy or meat or whatever it is on the package. You know that if it's doesn't say dairy, it doesn't have any dairy in it, which I know can be there's a lot of hidden ingredients that you don't even realize. So for someone with a dairy allergy, I know that kosher can be a very big help.
That's a good point. Yeah. Because there's so many foods that get recalled because they've, accidentally put casein in it or whey or whatever. And so, yeah. And the kosher certification, certifies that it is free of. So that's a very good point. Now, what, do you have some websites that you actually refer to, resources that you think listeners would find valuable around the kosher lifestyle besides your website? And
definitely go to homegrownkosher.com and check out my blog. Yeah. But a website that I find very useful is chabad.org, CHABAD.org. It's run by Chabad Hasidim, which is a sect of Orthodox Judaism. I'm not a member of it, but they are so good at explaining things to people who haven't grown up with it. And many times I've found myself taking a page and screenshotting it and sharing it in my own stories to explain something that, even though I've grown up doing it, I'm not so great at explaining to other people. So that's a great page, a great resource. And kosher food wise, there's a magazine called Fleishik's Magazine. I'm sure you can include it in the show notes or something, because I'm not going to be able to spell it right now, which is a super high quality kosher food magazine. It actually, I love it because it concentrates on meat and parv, non-meat or non-dairy foods. It is on the level of Bon Appetit magazine, super high food magazine. Travel, kosher food and travel. Well, now it's a little not so much traveling, but and restaurants and recipes. it's just, I keep being amazed by them, and they have a website as well and an Instagram. I would recommend their, like last night, I actually made the fried chicken from this month's magazine, and it was so good. Like my mother said it brought her back to her childhood. Her mother used to make fried chicken. It wasn't something my mother made when I was growing up because she was way too healthy of a cook, but she said her mother made fried chicken when she was a kid, and it brought her back to that. So
that just gave me chills. That's so awesome.
So that was great. And that I got that from this month, and it was like, it's just delicious. And the pictures are beautiful. I keep being, every month they come out with another one, and I save them. Every month is like a cookbook and a magazine. Those
wow.
two off the top of my head that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to go check them out, and I'll definitely put them in the show notes so other people can read about them. And because it's, as an event planner, and I had somebody comment in my group, the Eating at a Meeting Facebook group, that, serving kosher foods at events, it gets quite expensive, and, trying to find those meals from local caterers or whatever. So, and especially not to get that box that you explained, that airplane plastic container box sealed, but that kosher food kosher food is beautiful, and it's delicious, and it's healthy, and it doesn't need to be, it needs to be wrapped and prepared and served that way if that's what you are expecting, but it doesn't have to have a bad connotation to it.
It doesn't need to have been frozen for 6 months and then pulled out of the fridge, put in the oven for 2 hours till it's just a rock.
Right.
many places there are kosher restaurants or caterers who can provide double wrapped meals that would be acceptable to someone at an event who's looking for kosher. You're better off looking for someone local than ordering from one of these big places I had in their freezer forever. I know even in places where there aren't large Orthodox communities, there are people who do that. One of my followers who have become friends with lives in Nova Scotia, Canada, and she does kosher catering there. And there's not a large Orthodox community there. And I know there are many people who do it all over the world, actually.
Yeah. Actually, one of my guests a couple of weeks ago was Ellie Creel, and she lives in Dubai, and she has Ellie's Kosher Kitchen, Kosher Kitchen, because she couldn't find good quality kosher food. So somebody sent me an article that she was having kosher meat airlifted to her in Dubai, and now she's helping all these hotels because the UAE has opened up the doors and said, we want to welcome all of our Jewish, new tourism and residents with some good kosher foods. Okay, so we're wrapping up on 30 minutes here. Is there anything else you would love to share about what you do with the audience?
I think that one of the things that people don't realize is, like, besides for the bakery aspect, which is pretty obvious that it's hard work, that the creating content for my page and my blog, it's a lot of work. Those recipes, then you see that beautiful picture of muffins, that wasn't 5 minutes. I tested 5 different test recipes, and the first of which probably went to the chickens until I got it just right. And then I set up that picture, and then I typed up the recipe in a way that not only I could understand it, but that everyone could. And that's just something simple like that. That's simple. When it came to talking about honey, that was weeks of preparation that went into those posts to give over the information that people would be interested in a clear way. People don't realize how much work it is to set those things up. I know I have a lot of friends who are also food bloggers, a little bit come at it from a little bit of a different angle than me. Sometimes they'll accept sponsored posts for things that they would anyways use because their time is really worth something. And I understand it myself. And I really always appreciate it. I also have many friends who've written cookbooks recently. And it really bothers me when I see people sharing those recipes, like pictures from the book on the internet, when I know how much work went into, like, not just the recipe development and the testing and the photography and the graphic design, and how much money that the author themselves put into creating this cookbook. And then if you really like the cookbook, you should buy the book. And I really appreciate that myself, from all the work that I put into all the different types of things. And I love sharing, but it is a lot of work. So people say, oh, you're only busy in the bakery on, Wednesday and Thursday, Tuesday night, and Wednesday and Thursday. Like, what do you do the rest of the time? Oh, that's what I do the rest of the time, because things don't just appear, and I want to share and I love to share. but it takes time. It takes a lot of time and energy, but I'm still going to do it because this is a passion of mine.
Okay. Well, and not even counting the fact that you're out there, you're feeding the chickens, you're covering your vegetables for the storm that's coming, getting all of that ready behind the scenes. And it is a lot of work. Speaking of recipes, I scooted all the way back to the beginning and I found your gnocchi recipe. And I'm going to try that because I actually have some sweet potato flour that I did not grind myself, but I'm going to try to do that with some sweet potato. Use your recipe and with.
Did I post a gnocchi recipe? I don't even remember.
Yeah, well, way back it was like at the very beginning.
I didn't even realize. Now I have to scroll back and see.
Yeah, because I told my mom the other day, I'm like, I need to use this sweet potato flour for something, so I'm going to get some sweet potato. Hopefully, sweet potatoes work just as well as regular potatoes, russet potatoes, to do it. They may be soft.
I've never tried them.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try your recipe on that. And I'll let you know how it goes. One of the other, something popped into my head, but you're growing garlic as well that I thought was interesting. All right. So to end the podcast, I always love to ask everybody, what is their favorite food and drink? So do you want to share with everybody what you love to eat and drink?
Sure. So my favorite food is actually a holiday food that I don't know how to make myself, which is funny because I am quite an accomplished cook. Next year, I already spoke to my mother about it. I have to go and watch her make it and write it down. It's called krautschallet, and I'm pronouncing it wrong, like krautschallet. It's from the German, which I cannot speak, though my grandfather did. My mother's father's family were German Jews, and her grandmother made this recipe, but I think it's specifically a family recipe because I've spoken to many other German Jewish families that were originally from that region, and they'd never heard of it. So I think my great grandmother or her mother possibly came up with it. I wish I could describe it. It's like a savory stuffed cabbage, but there's no tomato in it. I know a lot of stuffed cabbage has tomatoes, but it's like a casserole, not individual rolls. And it has cabbage mixed together inside a wrapping of cabbage leaves around it. And it's savory. It's not at all sweet, but it's so delicious. Such comforting, cool weather food. I have to learn to make it. I really do. My favorite drink, it's just funny thing, but it's Honest Tea makes a tea, and it's like half tea, half lemonade that I really like. It's not very sweet, but it's really good. It's funny because when I woke up from my open heart surgery, that's what I was craving, like that, to drink that. I could only drink. I couldn't eat anything yet. And I saw my husband in the middle of the night wandering around Manhattan until he found like a CVS or something that was open that had it to bring it back to me. And I wasn't even allowed to drink more than one tiny sip at a time because they wanted to be sure that I could handle drinking. But that was the best tasting drink I've ever had in my life. It's a funny thing, right? And yes, it is kosher certified.
Okay, well, that's good to know. That's very good to know. Now, okay, so I know what it was. It was, so you also grow, and how this takes you time is you grow your own yeast.
Yes. So sourdough starter.
Your sourdough starter. So yeah.
A lot of people have heard about sourdough starters. A lot of people started baking sourdough during their quarantine. It's a pet at this point. It lives in my bakery on the table, and I feed it every 12 hours with a mixture of flour and water. And it's not just yeast, it's a symbiotic culture of yeast and bacteria that affect the flavor of the bread in addition to making it rise. I started a long, long time ago when I first started baking sourdough bread. And everyone's...
It lasts that long?
It's a long time. It's 17 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, predated the trend, right?
Exactly, because the store sold out of yeast. Yeah.
Right. It wasn't an issue because I had my starter. As long as I kept feeding it, then we were good.
That's amazing. So tell everybody again the website, and can I order the food online or the bread online and get it shipped to me, or is it just literally around your
So I
community?
don't ship bread. I do not ship bread. It's just for my local community. I believe that good bread should be local. I'm sure I can reach out, by the way, to the online community of sourdough bakers and find a microbaker in your area if you're interested. Oh, you said you're gluten-free, so not free. But if anybody wants to know and would reach out to me, then I can reach out to the community of bakers and find someone who bakes sourdough bread in their area. I don't know if there'll be a kosher baker, but I don't know too many other kosher sourdough microbakeries. There is online ordering, but there's no shipping. It's in my area. Actually, to get delivery, you have to put in your zip code to make sure you're within the few zip codes in my general area where I deliver to. But most of what I do is wholesale. I wholesale to a very large kosher supermarket. Only kosher. It's a huge store. It's like a ShopRite or a Winn-Dixie or something, but it's all kosher. And I wholesale and I deliver my bread there. And it's much more convenient for people to just pick it up off the shelf when they're shopping or order it online, even through the supermarket, even if it is a few dollars cheaper to get it from me. That requires like going to a separate website and ordering it and either coming to pick it up or paying for delivery. But it's local. It's homegrownkosher.com, but it's not the website is not just about ordering bread. It has my blog that has has recipes, information about growing food, all different things in my blog and on my Instagram page at Homegrown Kosher.
So excited that I connected with you. I saw her picture of her bread and then I saw the story. I'm like, I have got to talk to you. And she's like, who are you? And why do you want to talk to me? But I am so excited to learn so much more about you and to follow you, because I think there's so much that we can learn about the kosher cuisine, as well as connecting to our earth and where our food comes from. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.